implementations to designs. How many hate John Open?
Unfortunately, the microphone was off.
No, I think that what we're trying to figure out is kind of, if you look at, I mean, this group of people, we have fairly quickly found out that we have different positions in the community. I mean, I am now probably more in on the design front of it, and just as an end user of Drupal as a theme layer, where we have other people who really didn't want to fuck around with the design layer, and just, you know, the technical aspect of it. That's interesting. And the thing is that we're trying to figure out to not end up having a theme layer that the development community will hate to pieces because it's not secure, and the design or the themers will hate because they cannot figure out how to use it, and we're going to end up having a kind of a monster that none of us can use for anything. So, but to actually get to that thing, that's why we kind of need to figure out who people are. So how many would define themselves then as designers slash, you know, markup CSS people? Okay, how many is more into that whole technical, oh, we got arrays here? Good, like 50-50. We can start a fight.
So how many of you are really confident with HTML? Almost everyone. How many of you are really confident with PHP? Most of you. And did you learn that, like I learned PHP through Drupal, not before then? Okay. So you might not know real PHP, you might just know weird Drupal PHP. How many of you have never touched the theme layer but are really curious about what's going on?
Oh, wow.
That's pretty good. Okay.
Yes.
Another sort of constituency is I work with training people who are not themers or designers, and they're not techie people, but they want to build a site in Drupal, and they want to make it look the way they want it to look.
So is there anyone else in the room who is a non-coder at all? Like, I don't touch any files, I just want to push buttons and make my site change colors.
Yeah, actually, can we just raise the hands again, because I missed it. But
Okay, so confident with HTML, confident with CSS, confident with PHP, learned PHP for Drupal, just wants to push buttons. Okay.
Awesome.
Well, but I represent all of
Right.
them.
Yes. That's important.
I think that probably represents the people who are first coming into Drupal without any sort of background of coding at all, which is also a really important demographic for this.
Eventually we'll want to do all those things. But we have to not scare them away.
Yes.
We got
1 minute.
1 minute.
Yeah, we can start whenever you want, probably. Where's Chicks? Did you
Yeah.
make it?
If we get
Not
to
yet.
this slide and he's not here, we're just going to skip it.
Oh,
Who are we missing?
he's got like a 4 o'clock meeting or something.
Yeah, he said he was going to come for the first 15 minutes. But that's
He may have decided that wasn't viable. I mean, it's not really like him to be late, I don't think.
unless he's lost. He did show up for our session in, where was it? Denver, like half an hour late or something.
Yeah, but I mean,
Bad
can't
camp.
wait that
It's a
long.
bad camp.
Bad camp.
Right.
Yeah,
We'll just
do
start.
it. It's time.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. We're missing one member of our team. Hopefully he'll show up before his slide, but if not, we'll make do. So we want to start by introducing ourselves, and maybe we should start on that side with Alex.
Hi, I'm Alex Bronstein, and on Drupal.org, I'm Effulgencia. I'm one of the co-maintainers of the theme system, and I'm definitely on the back-end side. I don't know a div from a span. So, you know, I'm very interested in what the needs of the front-end developer community are to make sure that our theme system, you know, reflects that. And, you know, in the history of the Drupal project, we haven't always been good at making that happen. So, thank you all for showing up, and thank you in advance for, you know, giving us feedback and participating, you know, in the process of trying to make the theme system better. And I'll hand it over this way.
Introducing yourself.
Okay. So, my name is Tardanishi, better known as CAJax. Somewhat I started the conversion to Twig. One of the problems is that I won't have that much time to continue this, so I urge everybody who would like to see this happen to help. Thanks.
I'm John Albin. John Albin Wilkins, actually, is my full name. is my full name. And I'm also one of the theme system maintainers. But I call myself sort of a mutant hybrid in that I know both the sort of back-end PHP code and the sort of course systems within the theme system. But I'm primarily, in my day job, doing front-end stuff. So, you know, doing theming. So I go both ways, basically.
I don't. Hey, I'm Morten, the King of the North. I tried to get that name in. I'm more of a designer. I actually came in through the design and the front end thing, and I've been trying now for 6 years to get the community to understand that the way of Drupal's markup and the way of thinking is not right. It's slowly getting there. At least what we can see in this room is an acceptance of this as a problem. So that's kind of, I'm the angry man up here who doesn't want to know about the code and just want to, I want to fight with him all the time. No, so I'm hoping to get more of the designer and that aspect, the end user, the HTML, CSS nerds, to get them in on it. That's actually what I want to go back to, instead of hacking through PHP functions that I don't even understand what they're doing, just to get them to do something I want. So that's me.
I'm Jen Lampton. I've been working with Drupal for 6 years, and my first interaction with Drupal was in the theme layer. I'm a developer. I've got developers on modules on Drupal.org, and I'm trying to work on getting a new theme layer into Drupal 8 because I'm really passionate about making sure that new people have an easier time getting into Drupal so we get more contributors in our community.
Hi, I'm David Needham. I've been also working with Drupal for about 5 years or so. I'm kind of the working man themer, where my day job is theming. So while we have some like developers here and some designers and some people who are more focused on the back end, I do theming day in and day out, and I knew HTML and CSS coming into theming, but then I didn't know really PHP that well, and I basically learned PHP through having to wanting to do different things in the theme layer. And so I think I'm here for a little bit of perspective about what I would like to see from the next version of Drupal theming.
I'm Chris Vanderwater. I'm the Blocks and Layouts Everywhere initiative owner for Drupal 8. I'm here because this touches very heavily on a lot of the stuff I'd like to be doing. For myself, I feel competent in HTML, CSS, PHP, Drupal, whatever. So I came to Drupal as a themer, and I really care about this stuff, even though I primarily develop these days.
So we did this a little bit at the beginning to try and figure out what your knowledge was, but we also want to get a feel for some of your
a little bit of room up front and
experience.
out on the sides.
We stole the chairs, though.
Yeah, we took all your chairs, but you can sit on the floor if you want.
All your chairs belong to us.
So how many of you have built themes for Drupal 7? Okay, leave your hands up if you've built themes for Drupal 6. And leave your hands up if you've built themes for Drupal 5. Okay.
4.7.
No, that's too old.
Damn.
4.6.
Nope. Nope. Sorry. No. Okay. How many of you are really new to Drupal and are really curious about what the future may hold? So maybe you've never written a theme before. Okay. And then how many of you are experts, maybe even core developers, and you want to know what the heck we're doing up here? Okay. A few. That's pretty good. All right. So we're trying to make an entirely new theme layer in Drupal 8, if we can get it done in the time remaining. And we're going to be using Twig. So this is a modern template engine which is really cool. We're using new technology instead of old technology, which will be great. It's really well documented. It's easy to extend. It's secure. It's well tested. It integrates with an IDE, so for those of you who are developers, you'll be able to like troubleshoot, which will be nice. It's got a recognizable syntax, which we'll show you a little later on, similar to Python, JavaScript, and Ruby. And it's written by Symfony's author, so Symfony is also something that's gotten into Drupal 7. Excuse me, 8. We've had some technical difficulties so far with trying to implement Twig in Drupal, and I'm hoping that CHX will be able to talk a little bit about these things. We've tried several different courses of action to get patches in and run into some significant problems. The first of which is that we've had a lot of trouble replacing the render system or running Twig with render at the same time. So maybe you could talk a little about that.
Okay, so the fundamental problem is that the Drupal render function modifies the array you have passed into it, and Twig is simply not created to be able to do that. With Twig, you are passing a context into the template, and there is no way simply to do this. I have hacked Twig itself to get some ways there, but when I have submitted that, then obviously the Twig authors have refused to accept it, and it is indeed not acceptable. Because if you are using something like an array access, which is not too far-fetched, because one of the preliminary patches that we got in, which have simplified the fairly dreadful classes array things in 7, now you can just use classes, because we are using an array access object. So if you are using an array access object, then while you can pass it to Drupal render, it's not going to work there either. It's not going to work with Twig either. And so for this reason, the Twig authors simply refused to accept it. We could extend Twig with this hack, because Twig is almost infinitely extensible, but it would be very ugly. There are two ways we have discussed that we can attack this problem. One of them is to use preprocess to run all the Drupal renders that you want to run, that you would have run in your template. Instead, do it in preprocess, do it in PHP, and then in your Twig template, just print those variables. This might be acceptable while we are converting core, but we cannot leave this as a shiv when we release. And the problem is that we will need to have a shiv in place, because there's 3 months left before feature freeze, and it's almost impossible to convert every form to Twig. Renderables is going to be a big enough problem, but to change every form into this, that's just impossible. We are not planning to do that. So we need something that can take the form renderable arrays and make it work with Twig. The way we can do that, we have a class which can hold approximately the same information as the render arrays, but it is an object. It's an object. So what we can do, and what we probably should do, is to patch up a Drupal render to convert first into this object. Because if you are passing around an object you can modify, unlike an array, right? If you know PHP 5, when you are modifying an object, all copies of it get modified, because objects are passed around by handle instead of by value. So this is one thing that probably can fix the render and Twig living together. Just this is once again something that needs to be done, researched, coded, tested. Once you have that done, you will need to begin to convert everything you see which is renderable in 7, which is practically everything, to use this class instead of render arrays. Not forms. Because the problem with forms is that it's a problem, but we are using automatism to derive data structure and render structure from the same data structure. Unless you are setting bound parents, we are using the same structure to derive both. So logic and display is not separated. And basically we do not have the time to separate those two. We would like to. There are issues for this, even without Twig. No time.
So part of those problems are all contributing to our issue of being able to create a first working patch for Drupal 8, because the amount of work that needs to get done to do all of these things at once is almost insurmountable. We're also...
I just want to say, so there may be 10 of you who understood what Chicks was talking about. It was a really fascinating discussion for you 10 people. That was also the most technical slide in the deck. There's going to be a lot more sort of accessible slides the rest of the talk, okay? don't be like, oh my God, I'm in the wrong session.
We need the non-techie people for this session.
And also
And the techie people.
And the techie people, yeah. We need both. Duality. Love.
Also, partly what, in case any of you don't know, partly what happened was there was a schedule change. So there were actually 2 Twig sessions. There was sort of a beginner level front end track that was initially scheduled to be here in this room, and then there was also a core conversation. And we actually asked for those to be swapped. So we had the intro level one yesterday, and this is officially the core conversation. That's if you got here through the website, you're in the right place. But if you got here from the signs that are out on the door, you got to the right place. But if you only followed what's on your badge, then you sort of inadvertently ended up in a slightly more technical session than you maybe were planning on. But
Don't leave.
Yeah, so lock the doors.
Yeah.
Welcome to
Gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to leave, that's totally fine. No one will be offended. But at the same time, I actually think in a way it's a good thing, because we need the front end and the back end community talking with each other. We need to have Chicks basically has done a lot of the really back end work to get us this far and to identify problems. Like John said, if there's 10 of you here who understood what he said and can help us resolve those problems, that'll make things a lot better for all of us who are here. So.
Yes, one more thing I wanted to say about process. I have posted on this on Drupal Planet that I consider greatly important for Drupal 8 success to have this and other front-end things done. And I am going to give 1 hour of my time every single day from September 1 until we release Drupal 8 to help these front-end things. So if somebody wants to get into Twig, I am going to help ongoing. I will not be able to do it myself, but I will help.
It's what?
It's 4, by the way.
Okay, I stay up to 4:15.
Okay, cool.
Okay. So there's a couple of other things we're planning on doing, like removing some of these crazy layers. We'll talk about a little bit more, like process and maybe pre-process also, and that's also presenting an issue with a lot of work we've got to do in order to do that. And we're also running into problems with trying to figure out how the new theme system will interact with the new user interfaces. For example, the Blocks Everywhere initiative that Chris is running. There's a lot of stuff we haven't figured out yet, and trying to figure out how 2 things we don't understand yet will fit together has also been really slow in getting going. There's also probably a whole bunch of other technical problems we haven't run into yet because we're not very far along in the process, and that makes me personally really worried because we only have so much time to get this done.
12 weeks to be specific.
I don't think there are left any technical problems. So we got far enough. Really, the problem is that we just can't convert core in one step, and that we cannot convert forms at all. And because of that, we have some serious difficulties to bridge. But we got really far. It's really the process that is a problem. There are like hundreds of renderables to be converted.
All right, so there's a lot of work, and hopefully we've got it all figured out. But we want to go back a little bit and talk about why we decided to change to Twig. And I'm going to show you a couple of code samples here. Apologies if you can't see it very well. This is the node template, current status of Drupal 8 right now. And it's kind of a weird syntax that only exists in Drupal. There's also some inconsistencies. Sometimes when things are printed, they're accessed as objects, and sometimes when they're printed, they're accessed as arrays. And that's really confusing to people who don't have any understanding of PHP or programming, and they don't know when they should use one or the other. Sometimes things are just printed. Variables like title just get printed to the page, and sometimes things are print rendered to the page. So if you have a renderable, you could call this function render, and that's also really confusing to new people. They don't understand what the difference is between a variable that needs to be rendered and one that isn't. We also have PHP in templates is really insecure. When I was creating this slide, I accidentally refreshed the page on my site and dropped my node table. So even people like me sometimes wish that you couldn't do PHP in template files. This isn't necessarily a concern to most of you, but it's the kind of thing that makes the whole developer community in Drupal really nervous, just because we don't really know what we're exposing people to or what they might do that may be naughty. It's also a mess in Drupal right now. We've got a lot of template files that are provided by every module in core, and every module in contrib likes to write all of their own markup too. And people who write modules might not necessarily be the best people for writing markup to start with, and that leaves a lot for people who are experts at writing markup to have to clean up after. So we've got too much mess in there to start with, and we'd like to get that cleaned up too. I'm going to change over to John so he can show you some complex mix of subsystems that are currently going on in Drupal 7.
Why is it? It's.
So this is a simplified version
Why is it?
of the theme layer in Drupal 7.
I'm not sure why it's cropping the left and right side. Is not showing the full screen. Secondly, it wasn't doing that when we were testing. Where is my mouse? There it is. 1024 by 768. That's the right size. Yeah. Let's try this again. Sorry. It's 1020. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I really do have an S on my slide here. So this is a slide that I gave at DrupalCon San Francisco at a core conversation because I was one of the few people who had sort of looked at what we ended up with right before Drupal 7 came out. And this is literally, it's simplified. There are some things that I left out just because I couldn't fit them into the page. This is really crazy. I want to explain this in 90 seconds, but I had to talk really fast. There's a lot of things going on: theme registry, theme hooks. Hook theme defines what's in theme hooks. Variables, templates, theme functions, preprocess, process, template preprocess, template process, which I left off of this slide. Then render element. There's a whole like nebulous area here. This is obviously kind of crazy how complicated the theme system got in D7. And people were really shocked by this slide. But it wasn't until later that people started to realize that there's actually some really disturbing imagery embedded in this. Yeah, so it's not a pretty picture.
All right, so we know this is a problem. We started working on sprinting towards getting Twig into Drupal 8 earlier this year after DrupalCon Denver. And Martin had a front-end United conference where he did a sprint with all of the front-end people to try and figure out what the top concerns were with the existing theme system, and this is what we've come up with. They want the ability to add, change, and remove markup easily, consistency in the data that's actually presented to the theme layer, and sensible markup defaults. We also had a bunch of developers requesting other stuff like making things more secure and making the theme layer more performant. So that's what we've got right now. If you guys have any other concerns with the current theme system, we want to hear about it just to make sure that our priorities are on track. So does anyone have anything they really want changed or hate about the system? Yeah.
Can you use the mic? But where's the mic?
Oh.
I can,
Oh, no, put the mic back.
is it on?
Yeah.
Okay. I can just repeat the question if you don't.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Okay.
One of the, and this is partly because I don't necessarily understand the multi-layers of theme stuff, but one thing that I know is an issue and concern that I would like to sort of have kept in mind is the aspect of semantic markup and accessibility, because especially working for universities, those are kind of like non-negotiable things. We need to be able to do that. And of course, we'd like to do it easier.
So just that reinforces the first issue, an easier way to change the markup. So if you don't think the markup from core is semantic enough, or you want to add additional accessibility, it's got to be easier to do that.
Yeah, I'd also say that in Drupal 8 we already have HTML5 markup, so we have that semantics. We also have a lot of the ARIA roles already inside the templates, so part of that is being addressed, and as we convert those, TPL FIPS from the PHP template system over to Twig, those will continue to be there.
Yeah, one of the things that we talked a lot about at the Front-End United Sprint was actually that whole thing that we don't have any idea what tomorrow will bring us of markup change. And the problem we have with Drupal is we're always 2 years behind. And it is not because we have evil developers. It's because nobody told the developers what we wanted. And I mean, all developers I know, they love to get a challenge of, hey, can we do this? And they'll go, give me 10 minutes. And then chicks will come back with a big thingy I don't understand, and he will say, is this what you want? They'll go, yeah. I mean, and that is what we, from the kind of the front-end thing, needs to be better at, to actually figure out what is it that we really want. And we want to change everything at any given time. It's not really the answer for it. That's the Christmas wish. So we need to be a little bit more concrete and try to figure out actually what is it that we really want to do right now. What is the real problem?
Yeah, I would like to see the ability of more template engines to use. Like as a passionate front ender, I would like to be free of what template engine I prefer. There's also lots of innovation going on in that field. Just to mention client-side templating, which I think is a perfect solution. Also regarding the inclusion of some CSS precompilers like SAS and Compass. So I definitely would prefer to be able to work with something like Stylus in Drupal 8. So I think technically spoken that would mean that we would need a Drupal 8 core which provides us a sort of API style to hook whatever template engine we would like to use. So that would be, I definitely would vote for that.
Okay, that's great, and we'll readjust that a little later too.
I think Twig.
So the multiple theme engine thing has been raised. We have discussed it. And there's a trap. There's a trap in it. The problem is that it is not hard to provide multiple theme engine capability, but contributed modules are not going to be able to maintain several sets of templates. We cannot expect that to happen. So while if you look into 7, what actually happens is, I was surprised that this is there, but there is an explicit exclusion so that modules are only able to provide tpl.php files. Because it is unreasonable to expect from contributors to maintain several sets. So we could provide a possibility to have several theme engines, but don't expect that any contrib module is going to help you with that. So you will be completely alone.
Yeah, that's a really awesome point. Like, if we did that, you would have to start looking at modules and see whether they support the theme engine you want. And I mean, like, we're talking about how much effort it would be just to convert all of our existing theme functions and TPL files into Twig, much less anything else. So, like, from a pie-in-the-sky perspective, yeah, I totally hear you, but I don't know of a way to make it practical right this second. We probably need to pick one that we can all live with and really try to move forward there.
Historically, I mean, going back to Drupal 4.5, you could actually, it did support Smarty template, it did support various engines, and I'm
So the point was made that back in the day, you actually could have different theme engines, and the reason for that was because Drupal only used theme functions. It generated the markup within these PHP functions. There weren't template files, and therefore it was really easy to have template files that did certain things, and the rest of it was done by PHP functions.
So I guess we're like,
So you still, once again, you have the capability right now in the same system was rewritten for 5. 5, 6, and 7 has a way that you can supply an alternative theme engine, but modules cannot supply anything else but PHP template. And this decision probably is going to stand for 8 as well. So if you have a custom site and you want to write a custom theme engine for that site, go ahead. But there's not going to be anything more than, this is supported and you are alone.
I wanted to address the other half of your point about
We have a
SaaS
slide for
and
addressing this later.
Oh, do we?
Yeah. But if we could see if there's anything else that we should come back to and address later too.
Right. One comment that I'd like to make coming out of some of the observations we've had is that an architecture of what we're doing is too complicated. You can't reason with it. But part of making it simpler may just be to create high-level concepts that collect together the things we've got. It's not necessarily less functional to simplify the architecture. So we need a simpler form of your diagram, and I think that's...
We'll get to that one too.
That's like one of the next slides.
Maybe we should do the presentation and the questions.
Yeah.
All right, so we will return to these later. And if you have more things you think of during the rest of the presentation, we will have a discussion at the end. So we wanted to talk a little bit about how we think Twig can address all of the issues we've heard so far. And we're going to start by showing a simplified theme diagram of how Drupal 8 may look. Do you want to advance the slides so we don't have to double? Okay.
Okay, so, and now it's fine.
So don't freak out. This is Drupal 7.
Yeah.
Okay.
I rearranged
Rearranged.
it a little bit. I'm sorry. I rearranged it.
It's the same exact diagram, just rearranged all the lines and boxes to map better with the diagram I'm about to show you, which is the D8 one. And that's this. I'm going to go back and forth, and you can see like there's just huge swathes of stuff that just are just gone. The nice thing about this is that we've simplified the architecture because we have there's so many different ways that you can do a particular thing. If you have a particular task, there's like 8 ways to do it inside the theming layer, right? So we want to simplify the decision process of how I'm going to go about doing something by making the architecture simpler. So then there's, there's a way that you're supposed to do it, right? But we also want to ensure that the same functionality, the same capabilities that we had in D7 we're still able to do those things in D8, right? One of the one sort of just a brainstorming idea was let's make the D7 theme system easier by going back to the way it was in D6. That was literally a step backward, but it would have given us a headache with all this capabilities that even though the system was complicated in D7, it allowed us to do a lot of things if you figured out how to do them. D8, you'll still be able to how to do them. It would just be done in a slightly different way, in a much more consistent way.
And one of the ways that is this audible? No. Okay. Sorry. So one of the ways in which sort of that's achieved is that variables bubble. There's a lot of sort of interesting magic that can happen there. And right now, part of what was on that other slide is we had all these other bubbles, like we had pre-process and process and pre-render and what else, and yeah, all that stuff. And so essentially, all that stuff around variables, and that's a lot of what goes away. And it's specific because that's one of the key issues is like how many things can alter the variables that you get and at what point. And so by making variables basically smarter, we can still provide the same kind of functionality, just exposed in a more unified way. And that actually gets into some of the technical stuff that Chicks was talking about earlier around how to integrate, how to turn variables into smart variables, expose them to Twig as smart variables that can then still be manipulated by modules to the extent that they need to be. For example, the RDF module still needs to be able to insert the attributes that it needs to insert, into all of the different pieces. There's other use cases for needing to manipulate the variables, but by making those variables sort of, basically smart variables that can get refined through a consistent and unified process and exposed to the Twig templates in a unified and consistent process. I think that's sort of where a lot of that magic happens in going from diagram one to the other one.
Yeah. One of the major reasons why all that pre-processed stuff goes away is because they're smart variables. When you're inside the template, you'll be able to do a lot of really cool stuff right there on the variable as you're adding it to the template file. So the need for this whole other pre-process phase of trying to use PHP and all this stuff just sort of goes away.
All right, so to address some of the concerns brought up before, how is Twig going to help the ability to easily add, change, or remove markup? We're going to get rid of theme functions entirely. So all theme functions will become template files, which means when you need to override markup, you're going to need to do it in a template file. There won't be a question of where did it come from and how do I override it. And the template files themselves will be using a much cleaner syntax. We won't have print render. We won't have array access versus object access. It'll all be the same consistent markup and Twig syntax in your files. Consistency in data presented to the theme layer. Everything will be a smart variable, and you can drill into everything in exactly the same way. And we've got some code samples a little later on, I think. Maybe not. And then sensible markup defaults, common patterns. Twig doesn't actually solve this problem, but in the process of us having to go and replace all of the template files in core with Twig templates, we're going to need to review everything. And so it gives us an opportunity to look at it with fresh eyes and say, do we really need this div tag here, or can we take it out? Do we even really need this template file, or can we reuse a different one? And that'll hopefully give us a chance to clean up all of the mess that's currently in core and get it up to date, refreshed, and more consistent.
Yeah, there are several actually way too specific theme files inside Drupal core that we could use basically reuse some of the template files rather than having specific ones for like book links or whatever. There's a lot of cleanup we can do, just like remove this and then reuse some other components. So we can make some of the templates more reusable and then therefore get rid of a lot of the ones that aren't needed anymore.
And to address some of the developers' concerns, Twig also has the ability to auto-escape, so you won't need to figure out as themers whether the data presented to you is safe or not. Twig will automatically sanitize all of the data when it's being printed, so you don't know when you need to run check plain or check markup, you just print it and Twig will take care of that for you. And because Twig starts off as templates but compiles to PHP classes, if we can clean up our act with the template files anyway and recycle a bunch of stuff, we're hopefully going to get a huge performance gain in the ability to load one wrapper template file and print it 20 times on the page rather than in the PHP template version where you'd actually have to read it from disk 20 times and parse it and print it 20 times. So hopefully we'll get a performance gain and a huge security benefit by using something like Twig. We're going to hold the questions till the end, but write it down so you don't forget. And then to address the things that were brought up earlier, we're not really sure this is going to help the pluggable theme engine thing, but we did horribly break the ability to have pluggable theme engines in Drupal 7 by putting PHP calls to functions in template files, and we'll be removing that. Front-end templating will actually be really slick in Twig because there's something called Twig.js that lets the template files that you're using to produce your PHP pages also be used in JavaScript. So same template file can render front-end, back-end, doesn't matter, which would be really cool. So also presents us the ability, Twig is safe, we can show it to people in the browser, so we can get kind of a WordPress style editor that's like, here's your template, would you like to edit and save this? We're not doing that in core, but it does open up a lot of doors to stuff that's no longer taboo, like the contemplate module. You can now actually do stuff in the browser. You don't have to edit files on your file system anymore. So cool stuff in that direction. We already showed you the picture of a new simplified architecture, which is going to be really great. And then was there anything else that was brought up earlier that I didn't address with the Twig possibly solving all the problems in the world? Okay. So before we make this huge commitment to Twig, which may already be too late because we really like it, we want to make sure that we're not removing tools from our front-end developers that you guys really like. So we talked a little bit about getting rid of all theme functions in favor of template files. Do you guys like using template files to override your markup? Is that a medium you're comfortable with and tool that you like using? Can we get a show of hands for I love template files? Okay. How many of you...
Is there anybody who's honestly a no to that?
How many don't like template files?
Just like one or two.
So our developer types probably, but...
Not terribly fond of template files called PHP in them.
So template file syntax is going to be changing, but just the concept of...
Yeah, that's the question.
Okay.
That's the question.
Current template files, not so keen.
Okay. What about using theme functions to override your markup? How many really like the PHP theme function override in your template.php file?
I don't know what the alternative is.
Yeah, I'm kind of like,
So
I have to do
you do it all the time. If the
fun when it solves
alternative,
my problem, right?
in this case, the alternative will be a template file that has mostly HTML in it, in this case. So how many of you hate the PHP theme functions that you have to put in your template.php file?
How many of you would rather have TPL overrides style instead of theme function overrides? Yeah.
Okay.
one way of doing it, thank you.
Okay, so pre-process functions. How many of you really like the ability to have a pre-process function to add or change variables that get printed out in your template file? Okay. And so is there anyone who hates the pre-process function and would much rather just dump that PHP code right in that template file and skip that step?
I would like to do it other way, but sometimes you have to use the pre-process function, so... But
Okay.
I'm not lucky with it.
So we still have more people would like the pre-process than do it in the template file, but
Well,
you want to rephrase that?
Yeah, if there were an easier way to get new variables into your templates, would you be open to it? Yes.
No.
Okay.
Easier.
You're leading the question.
I am leading the question, but that doesn't mean that it's
Here's a punch in the face, and here's a donut.
Okay.
One thing about these questions, they're kind of weird to me because I am used to doing things the Drupal way to get what I need to do my job, which is theme. So if we're talking about new files or a new way of doing things, maybe we won't have the same problems that I use a pre-process for.
Okay.
So I don't necessarily want a pre-process if I don't need, like if that's
don't
not,
need it.
if it's a non-issue with
Okay.
Twig or with whatever changes we're making.
Okay, we also have a slide for, in a perfect world, if you didn't do things the way Drupal made you do them. So maybe we'll wait for that. But I realize this is all very, like, based on what we have, how do you feel about, but that's kind of where we're starting, so that's where the questions come from. He really has a question.
Yeah.
Sorry, I guess concretely, it's just like, what about loops and conditionals and things like that? How do you do that?
Yeah,
Twig
we've
takes care of it.
maybe I haven't put any syntax examples of Twig in here, but I've got another presentation open I can show you that'll do that too.
Yeah, show the four comparisons.
Okay.
Because that's killer.
Okay, so a couple more. How many of you are currently using hooks in your theme, in your template.php file, you form alter, whatever? Okay. Do you love those hooks? This is new in Drupal 8. We added all these things, or 7, sorry. Okay. How many of you hate the alter hooks? That's pretty good. People like them. That's good. Okay.
It's the same sort of question, though, as the rest of them.
Yeah, they're all the same. Okay.
We like
one
them
more.
because it gives us the power to do what we want, but we don't like the way that it works.
Would you be completely unopposed to writing a module that did that since it's exactly the same syntax?
Yes.
I'm kind of, I personally wouldn't want to write a module that did, because I had to write them, like, basically you're telling me that I would move my PHP code from my template.php to a module just because I have to, but actually the thing that I'm altering is in the template.php file really is a display issue. It's a theming issue. It shouldn't be in a module.
Let's take
So,
the
so
forms,
how
right?
many of you
That's
hate
where it's
the
at.
idea
just
of
like-
having to write a module to go with your theme? Okay.
That's Drupal 6 right there. I mean, the whole form hook also takes care of that. I mean, that's the reason I always had this little crap module with me that basically took care of forms, because Drupal didn't think that I was grown up enough to take care of forms in my themes, so I had to do a module for that.
Okay.
The other thing is, can a theme depend on a module currently?
So the question was, can a theme depend on a module? There's actually a patch that, or no, there's an issue that was submitted by CHX when he asked me this question in IRC like 2 years ago. And I'm like, yes, we should be able to do that. And so he wrote an issue and like assigned it to me and said, okay, now write the patch.
It's still an open issue.
Yeah, it's still an open issue. It's not actually that hard, but it's got so much other stuff on my plate. It's like it's not an itch that I have. Right? It'd be really easy, but I need somebody else to like, ooh, I want to do that, and go and do that. And I can help you out maybe a little bit, but I don't have any desire to go and write that patch.
We're going to get you drunk enough to get you to do it. So, yeah, let's keep moving here. I'm just going to kind of like gloss over this particular topic at this point. Treating themes as though they're modules has some negative ramifications, but like if it's really a killer feature, then maybe we should just visit different ways of doing it without like making it too different. I don't know. We just wanted an answer, and I think we've got one. So,
Okay. So, forgetting everything you know about theming for Drupal, if you were tasked with, make a theme for a website, how would you do it? I write Drupal themes, not a themer, and my approach is to start with a style sheet and stick it on top of Drupal. And when Drupal doesn't give me a class or whatever, then I go and alter Drupal to do that. And I feel like that is the standard mentality of almost all of the Drupal community, is that we don't care what comes out, you just stick it on and it'll look pretty and it'll be fine. And I feel like that's really offensive to the people who are of like skills in the art of HTML and CSS. And I want to know what you would do if you could start clean in terms of creating a theme for Drupal. So does anyone have a story of like, I wish I could X to do a Drupal site?
Answer that question.
You gotta turn on your mic.
Okay, is it turn on? It's turn on.
Okay.
Okay,
Go ahead.
so, well, my dream scenario, the thing I've been dreaming of for 6 years, was actually I just did this beautiful markup, and now I take the Drupal thing, and I now put in the small variables where I need them, and I can render all the stuff out, and Drupal doesn't touch my markup, and I can move it around in some kind of business logical way, so I don't have to get special modules to do all this kind of stuff. And I can take the way that I figured out, IE8 is dumb because of this, and that. Firefox 7 doesn't get this. Chrome 12 doesn't get this, whatever. And then I can like patch my markup in, patch my CSS in. And then when I figure out 6 months later, that was totally bullcrap what I did way back then I can change my method yet again. And that's kind of the whole thing, that we cannot expect to figure out now what it is that the future will bring us. So that would kind of be my dream situation.
So you like to do HTML first and then put Drupal into it rather than, okay. Is that the kind of general consensus from people who are artists at HTML and CSS, that you want to write it regardless of the crap that Drupal spits out and then stick the Drupal in?
Can we get a shit ton of hands so they understand?
Okay.
Anyone opposed?
All the people who aren't actually in the room who decided not to do Drupal, an awful lot of them
Say that too. Okay. All right. So we need to figure out how much of that dream experience is realistic in the land of Drupal. There's some weird stuff going on with Drupal's templates within templates within templates within templates that makes it really hard for you to do that all in one place. But I don't know, maybe Twig won't help with that problem, but we can definitely think about it. And then it sounds like our priorities for Drupal 8 remain basically the same as what we talked about, the stuff that we figured out at the front-end United sprint, cleaning the markup up, making the system easier to use, and whatever else. But we also want to make it easier for you to drop Drupal into your markup as opposed to stick your markup onto Drupal, which is going to be really hard. So it sounds like we really like Twig. Can I get a consensus from people from what you've just seen right now, or should I do code samples first?
Let's do some code samples.
Okay, code samples first.
Yeah, do that.
Code. What does it look like? Okay, so this is how you would write an item list in Twig. If you're going to write logic, there's a percent sign in a curly brace. That's how you'd put it around an if statement or a for loop. And if you're going to print something, it's just 2 curly braces. If you want to drill into a variable, like if you want to get 1 level, 2 level, 3 levels deeper, it's always a dot. So here we have an example with attributes where you've got classes and attributes. And so you can get all the way down to classes by separating with dots, or up just 1 level by attributes. You don't need to know whether it's an array or an object. And the length of this file is actually nice and concise. We've got, sorry, I guess I have all printing with double curly cues, logic commands with percent symbols, and comments in pound signs. So, skip the attribute section. Okay. So this is an example of the theme username function. Again, we're not only converting template files from PHP template to Twig, but we're also converting theme functions. So our current theme username function is super messy. Our theme username Twig template would be really simple. It's only 5 lines of code. Actually, it contains an anchor tag. All right. So here is the theme image function. Would turn into an image tag. Right? Sounds good. Theme link, an anchor tag. Thank goodness. And this is the theme item list function before compared to what it would look like after. So in general, we can remove a lot of lines of code from core by switching to something like Twig. We do need to do a lot of work to get those variables as they are now into smart variables so that Twig can figure out, do you want to print items, which will do all of them, or 1 item, which will do just 1, or 1 part of an item, like an anchor tag or a source tag for an image, or whatever it is, independently of everything else. So there's a lot of work involved. In the theme system, the way it'll work is that every theme hook will just have a template file and the list of variables that get printed into it. So it's more of a Drupal 6 style hook system where it's like, this is the template, these are the variables, and you guys, of course, would have a way to add or change those variables. We don't know what that's going to be. It's not going to be pre-processed because Twig does all of this processing at the time it's requested, not beforehand. So there's no there's no process. It's just rendering. Won't be called rendering. We need to figure out how that's going to work, but hopefully it'll be much simpler. And there's a lot more we don't know. Okay, so now can we do a show of hands of just from what you've seen so far, how many of you are feeling fairly positive about using Twig as opposed to the mess we're in now? That's pretty good.
We don't really have an alternative, right?
So
is there anybody who still has very serious doubts? 1, okay, 2, 3.
Okay.
So we had an architectural sprint in March that Jen organized, and I was a Twig skeptic coming into it because I was like, okay, just throwing a new solution at it isn't necessarily going to fix the problems that we have in this theme system. And we started with specifically said, let's start with a list of things that are problems, right? And then see if Twig fixes those problems. And we had a set of criteria to evaluate Twig against. And it turned out it solved all the problems that we had and added in new cool things that made things even better than I had originally imagined. So within those 3 days of the sprint, I was converted. I feel like Twig does solve our problems. But I have like answers if you have questions about that.
And I also started as a skeptic because I know the move from 6 to 7 had its own issues, and you know, learning a new system completely like Twig is gonna. I felt like at first it would become like a huge barrier to entry for people that are moving from 7 to 8. But the benefits in the long run, like looking at those code examples, looking at how easy things are going to be, if it happens, it just seems like such an amazing benefit that, yeah, sure, I'll learn Twig.
Out of curiosity, one question you haven't asked is how many people in here, because I don't just template in Drupal, I template across the globe, over to CMSs, and I actually been templating for a very, very long time when Smarty first came out. So how many people in here have used other templating systems and do use other templating systems?
That's a great question. Have any of you ever used Twig before?
Yes, that's the next
Like
question.
two?
Okay.
Okay. It's really new, but yeah, okay.
Mustache.
My question may actually be pretty much exactly the same thing. Twig is new, and it's from the Symfony people who we directly have a great relationship with.
Yeah.
On the other hand, the examples look exactly the same as Smarty to me.
Yes,
And the question is, Smarty was also really kind of hot stuff in like 2004, 2005, and there was a Drupal 5 template engine based on Smarty. And my question is, just like we're getting into this, and I guess we're really committed to this. And the question is, Twig is better than Smarty, I guess, for reasons that are not visible in the code examples.
Right. The big power of Twig comes in the engine that's behind the scenes. It's taking advantage of a lot of stuff that's really new in PHP. That Smarty is old enough that it doesn't use just because it didn't exist back then. But syntactically, you're right, it's very similar. It works the same way. I think part of that is because they're trying to choose a syntax that's familiar to lots of people. It looks like Mustache. It looks like Python.
I looked at.
We'll work on that. I think that's negotiable.
I used Smarty maybe about 6 years ago. It's changed a lot since then. I haven't seen the most recent version. I know it's headed in the same direction that Twig is right now. It might be there already too, but the underlying thing that makes Twig so much better than PHP template is that one of the performance problems with PHP template is if we have there's a field tpl.php in core. It's not actually used. It uses theme_field. It uses that theme function by default, unless you override it in your theme as a field TPL. And the reason for that is because of performance. The way that we're using those files, you end up having to basically evaluate that entire, do a PHP eval on that file repeatedly, right? And that is really, really memory intensive, and you explain this better than I do, actually, but correct me if I get this wrong. It's really not very good for performance. And the trick that Twig has is that basically the Twig syntax, it's not just another file that has to reload over and over again. There's a compilation phase, so it takes all of the Twig files and then compiles them into PHP classes, right? So then Drupal just loads that file with the compiled class in it once, and then the class is just in memory. So then it just uses that class repeatedly over and over again to create objects, and it's really fast.
See, I mean, looking at basically where you're going with Twig is, and I don't mean any offense to anybody, right? But where you're going with Twig is actually to a proper templating system, because PHP template isn't actually a proper. It's not what you consider for going back to. As I said, 9 or so years ago, it's kind of not really what it was.
Right. So
it's kind of a hack together, like a bit of a hack together thing between templating and PHP, which is why you've got so many security issues in it.
Right.
Because it isn't that, which is where Twig's going, and that's great. But the big concern is, well, one thing that we do have to address, and I think people have to be aware of, is the licensing differences. So Twig is permissive license, Drupal is GPL license, and that will have an effect for designers and everything else as well, because all of a sudden you're permissive licensing, which means that I can actually take all your design, I can take this, I can do other stuff with it.
we forgot to have that license discussion yesterday that we were going to. We all went to the big garden, and Larry was there, and we'll get the licensing issue resolved. I'm almost positive, but
let people know so they're aware
yeah.
that there is this difference here.
Right, there's a lot of stuff we have to work out, and licensing is one thing, but I don't think that the licensing is going to be a blocker. I think if we went to the Twig community and said we want to put this in Drupal, we'll be flexible. I mean, we were able to work with Symfony. Maybe we just get Twig on Symfony's license. I mean, there's a lot of different ways we can go with it. If at the end of the day they say, like, it's not going to be compatible with GPL, that will be an issue. But I don't want to raise too much alarm about that until we're sure that's the problem.
Have you guys considered the problem of core theme file discoverability? Because historically there has to be talks about when we created Stark, taking all the template files out of us black caves of the core module system and so on, and put them all to the Stark template so you can see them. Or actually it's better to do this kind of better API.Drupal.org automatically generated kind of theme guide, which just pulls the themes and annotates them. So you don't need to look for the files inside the Drupal file directory, but you rather go to the documentation page. So which is better?
So I think that that's a really relevant topic. I don't actually recall ever discussing it while John and I were doing Stark, but when the question came up earlier about how do you actually want to work with Drupal? Oh, I want to write my markup and then drop Drupal into it. That's difficult by virtue of the fact that there aren't any themes out there that just have an override for every template available by default. And if you made one, is that what yours does? Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. Let me retract that. Morton is the only person who has a theme that provides a template for every TPL file in the system. Yeah, and if he says it's a pain, then obviously there are other things to consider here. But even at that, that number is only going to go up if we move across every single theme function to be a Twig file and all of this. So I mean, there are a lot of considerations to make. I think that if you dumped a theme like that on a themer, they would go away.
So what?
They'd sift through the hundreds.
I mean, the biggest problem for me in the Drupal world is to figure out where the fuck did that piece of shit come from.
Yeah. So
and I think in
right, discoverability is a huge problem. So and one of the biggest problems is
file somewhere would just be wonderful.
Yeah, the pre-process functions that are adding in new variables and the theme functions are completely undiscoverable really for an average themer because it's somewhere inside the .module file, maybe it's a .inc file, and then it just becomes really hard. When we move that stuff to a template file, at least you'll be able to, go into the core directory in Drupal 8 and see it's .twig, right? Is the file?
Yeah.
So there'll be inside each of the core modules there'll be a series of .twig files that are related. So at least that will make all of Drupal's theme hooks be much more discoverable because they're literally in files that are right there.
We haven't really talked about this either, but in previous versions of Drupal, they lived all in the theme engine, right? All the template files used to be in a single location. And the reason that we split them out into all of the individual module files is because that's how contributed code adds their templates. And so it got confusing for people to know, if it's a core module, it's in the engine, but if it's a contributed module, it's in the module file. And there's a chance that we can maybe change that pattern. I mean, we need to talk about it a lot. But if what core ends up doing is providing a default set of template files for this is how you do lists, tables, links, images, whatever, contrib modules can use those instead of having to write their own and put them together. Here's a box that contains a table and a list and an image, and I didn't need to write any markup. And so then it would make sense to reconsolidate those template files into a single location. We haven't talked about this yet, but there is a potential here for things getting better in this area also.
I'll repeat your question if you want to ask it.
So the
what if
question
we
is, why
wanted
do
you to
want-
learn Twig?
I have to repeat. Let me repeat the question first. So why are you making me learn PHP if I just want to? I'm just concerned about HTML and CSS and JS.
I'm the front ender. I'm not a programmer, and I'm not the back ender. So I mean, put it in other words, I don't tell you how to write the database.
Right.
I mean, I don't piss in the swimming pool, so don't swim in my toilet.
See, this is why I love front-enders.
I think we have to get Morton to repeat that one.
Yeah.
Can you?
Just let me finish this to just like get the stuff together that we heard. So what I feel responsible for, because as a front ender I have to do theming and I have to do templating. So what I definitely want to learn is, tell me how your templating works.
Okay.
And I think Twig is the right way as far as I've seen it so far.
So-
And I mean, I see the solution there for the moment, and I think it seems to me to be the best, like, what we can do at the moment. I would really be glad if you would just, like, for further versions and for the future and the future of the future, if you would just, like, see that front-enders are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And don't ever force them to just, like, care for anything else.
Yeah.
If you're going to use the whole thing about using the content management system, right? Not just Drupal, every single one of them. I agree in open source is templating. We have to have templating. That's the reason why PHP actually is a templating language. That's where it came from originally.
Yeah, exactly.
So you kind of have to have that. And it's the difference between having, when you are using just HTML and an index.html file, you can control that. But when you're doing it from a content management system, because you've got this big framework there, and because you're reusing all this stuff, you have to have a templating language.
Well, I think what the point here is not so much that whole PHP thing. The point is that we don't want to end up as front-enders with a system or language that doesn't make sense to us, a system or language that we cannot change into whatever else we know about HTML, CSS, design implementations, JavaScript, SVG generation, things that whatever that comes in the future. That's the thing, is that what we're having right now is a system that is, that pushes people like us who see ourselves as front-enders out in a way that we have to do programming that you do very well, I do very dumb. And that's how all these security issues are coming in. So we need to get this we need to have a bunch of front-enders who see themselves as front-enders, who takes a great pride in this to actually help you guys out. That's kind of the thing that we need to do.
We're out of time. I just wanted to say one thing, that just tell me how to use the template system, right? So Twig has great documentation. I literally downloaded an EPUB about the Twig syntax and the Twig system, loaded it up on my tablet, learned it on the airplane on the way to San Francisco when we had our architectural discussion. It's really easy and it's well documented, unlike Render API in Drupal 7. So
Yeah, and
evaluate us. We can continue the discussion out in the hallway for the rest of the day. Anytime you see any of us, drag us and start talking about it. And of course, Friday we're going to have, Friday we're having a sprint. So thank you.
There's one final challenge, if you guys don't mind. Just want to throw it out just in a couple of words. We have to remember, too, that a lot of the stuff we build gets handed off. And right now we're talking really about that initial effort. So I think we also, especially if we're talking about multiple templates, have to think about how that gets handed off to other teams.
Can I get 5 fearless front-end warriors? We need that. But we stood up yesterday at a session, Emma Jane's intro session. And it used to be only John who stood up as how many themers are working on Drupal core? And John remembered to tap me up on the shoulder like, oh, fuck, oh yeah, I'm into this thing, And we were standing 2 guys, and we need John is more of a programmer. We need more people who really lives down into this HTML, CSS, JavaScript, design implementation thing. And the issue queue is a hard place to be. We need support groups. We need to do this in another way. So I need some people to back me up to fight. Yay.
Thank you again.
Okay. But before.
All right, lock the door. No
Wait.
one's leaving.
Okay, wait. Before you all go, I also want to just say there's 2 really important ways in which all of you or any of you who are interested can help, and they're very important. One, for the people who've expressed concerns, doubts, especially if you feel uncomfortable, if you're in the minority, if we're doing a sales pitch, and so it's everyone's like, yay, this is great, and you're like, I have doubts, but I don't want to stand out. Please stand out. Actually, we need the benefit of an open source community is that minority voices, might actually might see things that the rest of us are blind to, and it's great to get that feedback. So, we have the issue queue, we have groups.drupal.org, other sources. Find us if you don't know the sources. Give us feedback, give us negative feedback as much as positive feedback. That's one. Two, if you have positive feedback, if you're excited about this, if you think this is important, participate in some of the same, online channels and actually make those comments, because, even if this is great, it's only going to happen if we do it, and we're always evaluating priorities, right? Like when I work on Drupal core, I'm thinking like, okay, what's going to help the community the most? Is it working on, a theming system, or is it working on config management, or is it working on some other aspect? And so knowing what's important to people versus like, yeah, that's cool, but yeah, so what, is also very helpful. So I encourage both negative feedback and like, yes, we have to do this and here's why. So thank you.